Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leprechaun Alley. My name is Carrie.
And I am Michael.
We are here to take requests for live astrology readings. Give us your date of birth and year, combining the Western and terrestrial or Chinese systems by request. And in the meantime, we will just kind of talk about whatever comes up.
No, so what's the topic for today?
So, you know what? Things were a little rough when I was trying to look at mood disorders and on the spot. Because I'm sitting in front of a camera and you're watching me retrieve information, which is really not helpful. So, what I thought might be a better approach is to talk about some celebrities and their planetary combinations. So,
Well, who's the first one you want to bring up?
well, in the process of all of this, there's somebody that I had to mention. It came up in the search results right away. A young woman. Her name is Kaylee Posey, who I know I shouldn't even talk about this stuff. Who actually had committed suicide. Her birthday, I believe it was last night or a couple days ago. Her birthday, April 19th, 2006. She's an Aries, year of the fire dog. She was.
Who's this?
Her name is Kaylee Posey, and we don't really know a lot about her. Very talented.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Yeah, she's very talented. I guess she was one of her skills is that she was a contortionist. She was in Toddlers and Tiaras, and that's not a show I watch, so I don't know that much about it. But that's what she's known for, and being very talented in many ways. So
I'm back.
So what really surprised me about this, or should I say didn't surprise me about this, is the suddenness. And I'm thinking, what would drive a dog to have that kind of pressure to want to take their own life?
Well, first we have to look at the combination of this
Right, the
person
Aries.
before we can really just jump in.
Right. She's an Aries, April 19th, 2006.
All right, so you're dealing with two opposite signs. The 2006 puts her into the Chinese sign of the dog, and it happens to be the year of a fire dog.
Right.
And this is a weakness for the dog because the dog's nature is to be metal, is to shine, is to create law and order.
And listen, before we say anything more, I just want to send out condolences for the family. I'm so very sorry for your loss. Okay, go ahead.
Now, this is a woman,
Young woman, yeah, Kaylee Posey.
and she decided to give up on life.
Very, very talented and successful.
2006, my gosh,
Yeah.
that's what, 16 years old?
16 years old, yeah.
Wow, that's the wrong.
I had to talk about it.
Well, I think the first problem was the age.
Yes.
I'm not so sure that the astrology alone is going to explain it all.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. Is those are interesting conditions to discuss.
Unfortunately, I think this problem is resulting from sociological problems that
Right.
we have in the world all around.
I was having my thought about it because, we both have our own crazy tendencies. My thought about it is I get to a place where, because I'm a dog and I'm obedient in a way, I don't really do it on purpose. It's just my nature. That's where I go.
Well, let's say something about this person.
So, but if I feel like I have to serve too many masters and I can't figure out what to do, I'll turn.
Well, you're not going to go commit suicide.
No,
because of it.
Well,
Look, I look at it this way.
I would say it an experience of being overwhelmed.
Well, we have
Yeah.
to look at this person's nature. If you want to,
Right.
if you want to tackle this issue from astrology and see what went wrong astrologically, what can you explain
Right.
it astrologically? What went wrong? In other words, we can't really get into this person's mind and realize
Oh, of course not.
and be able to say this is exactly what took her. Well,
Mhm.
of course, but one big major problem is that When you're growing up, the world is always so much greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And depending on the environment that you're in, the kind of parents you have, the schooling that you have, the teachers that you have, the friends that you have, all these are going to factor into how a person looks at the world. We are presently in a world in which too much attention is made on the outside. The intention is made on what we own and what we can achieve and the job that we can get and the money that we can make. And everything is focused on the outside. The outside for a 16-year-old is incredibly difficult. It's a
Yes.
harsh
You better
place to
believe
look at
it.
a world
Mhm.
where you're already expected to go out and make money and get the best job. Make sure that you have one better than your friend or whatever, that you can compete in society.
Yeah, that's a tough age.
This is difficult on any young person, and of course, if that person feels abandoned, then there's going to be very little
Mm.
internal strength for that person to survive the demands, the pressure that's put onto their person. Now, looking at the dog, well, one thing we can say about the dog, dogs usually have a lot of tenacity. They can overcome almost any kind of depression and setback because they don't give up.
Right.
We are all familiar with the story of people dropping off their animals far away because they don't want them.
Mm.
And the animal, when it happens to be the dog, and usually is the dog, finds its way back home no matter where they get dropped off. We have movies about dogs that have gotten lost on camping trips, and they are hundreds and hundreds of miles away from their original location or where they lived, and they find their way home. They don't give up. Now, how does a dog all of a sudden find that it's too much to live? We have to go to the sign Aries as well.
Mm. And
Aries,
oh,
uh,
I just did want to briefly add the Aries, the reason that she did that, I don't that she actually accomplished it, which is horrible. Part of that does have to do with her being an Aries because because they're very fast acting.
well, and also the
And if they
Aries.
turn on themselves, it can be very dangerous.
Well,
And that usually doesn't happen, but
the problem is Aries is single-minded.
or even who cut off his ear?
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh, and he was an Aries,
An
right?
Aries, yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's an Aries. It was the
Oh.
day after, 2 days after my birthday. He was
Oh,
Van Gogh was
yeah.
March 31st on March 29th. So now we have these two components. How do you take a dog and break their spirit? Well, broken heart is about the only way you can
That's right.
destroy a dog.
Perpetual romantics.
A dog has this ability to stay with what they're aligned to stay. If they have obviously their masters who own them, they are loyal to their masters. They can be abused and they will still love the person who tends to them. But when their heart is broken, and that is that they're being mistreated all the time, they will eventually collapse because when they're brokenhearted, they have lost everything and they become almost incantated, almost mesmerized with an idea, and then they don't see well, let's put it this way: the dog sees everything in black and white, and if they're only seeing black, they can be extremists, and there's no white. So there's black, let's call black, sadness or unhappiness, brokenheartedness. If there is no possibility of joy, no laughter, no promise for something better, then they they make up their minds. The Aries is very mental. A lot of people do not understand this about Aries.
Yeah. I was thinking also, Michael, excuse me, of how adolescents can be very difficult for an Aries because they're a little slower to grow emotionally and they need time to process that. And so the world is really dramatically different for them.
Well, one
And that,
problem
or that they can have that experience of it.
one problem with an Aries is that he is able, let's keep in mind that in China, this is the month of the dragon. And what is the
Right.
dragon really
Mm,
notorious for?
mm,
It's not just that he can scare people and that he's a very powerful and destructive animal. It's that he lives in the cave, and
right.
that's where he spends most of his time.
Yeah.
He doesn't spend a whole lot of time outside making a big mess of
Yeah. They
things.
aren't players.
No, the dragons,
No.
if we see all movies that are made about the dragon, is that they've been dormant for hundreds and maybe thousands of years, and all of a sudden they're disturbed and they wake up. So they're not notorious to be on the scene, on the stage, and play acting. They appear only when it's necessary. Otherwise,
Right.
they're alone
Mm.
by themselves. So one of the problems that I would have seen with this girl
Oh, it's so interesting. Yeah.
is that her whole world was stuck inside her brain. It was private. She was not sharing it with anybody else.
Yeah.
Why?
Plus,
Because
she's fire on top of it. So,
to
yeah.
for her to share, someone would have to knock on the door and say, "Hey, wake up! I'm here."
Right.
And apparently, she was left alone. She obviously was living extremely alone. In other words, it didn't matter if there were people around her. She wasn't sharing what was going on in her own mind
Yeah.
and what was she was feeling, and obviously never got around to expressing her disappointments,
Yeah.
her unhappiness, her disenchantment. So she'd get to a point where her mind would say, "Well, I'm alone and there's no purpose to be here. What's the purpose of this anyhow?"
Mm.
She's not finding anyone who is willing to interact with her to a
Right.
degree where you could excite her into new possibilities, into uh, new meanings, new values. What is there in life besides what which she's been seeing on television and around and her friends and the neighborhood, and they're all chasing something that she doesn't understand,
Right. That's
and
the Aries. Yeah.
she doesn't understand it because she's living within herself. Her whole world
Right.
is in the little pituitary part of the brain, which is teeny little pea, and this is where she's spending most of her time. In some ways, she may have contributed to her depression because
Oh,
the contribution would have come in the fact that she didn't feel compelled to look outside for a while. She spent too much time stuck with the value system that she managed to accomplish. If there was much of a value system, we don't know. We don't know
oh,
this.
she was. Yeah, there was. I don't know, like but she was a performer. She was very talented. I know that it's interesting. A lot of dogs do end up becoming famous. There's a lot of famous dogs just in the process of responding to a need and being obedient. They end up in that position. Oh, you want me to do this? Okay, I'll do it. That's how they end up being famous. Uh, but the thing is about the dog, I could point out, even though that may be happening, they may not be particularly ambitious. They're doing this in a process of obedience, of love, of integrity, of respect. Initially, I mean, things get haywire, of course,
Well,
but
we have to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly
oh yeah,
in this
yeah.
sign. We have the good that Aries has
There's actually,
energy.
yeah,
They have energy. They're prepared to perform in any way they need to.
yeah,
But the problem is Excuse me for a moment. I have a problem with
We're going back and forth. We're trying to figure it out.
mute.
Um,
I should have taken a Claritin.
yeah. We could do it. We could also do. Yeah, you get to Claritin. Yeah. Well, we should have had a V8. Don't drink that stuff. It's really bad.
So, well, the only way I'd have to relate to her the way I would have related to myself growing up as a
Yeah.
16-year-old.
Right, because he's a fire dog too, 60 years older, right?
I remember
Yeah.
the poetry that I wrote when
Yeah.
I was 16, 17 years old. I would sing in my bedroom in a melancholic way, and my father would come in, and not that we had much of an exchange, but he apparently was worried about me.
Mm.
My father really never was allowed to mingle with his children. My father was removed by my mother. She made certain to it that he had little or no action involving him with his children, 7 of his children. One day he came in when he heard me and he said, "Michael, what's the matter with you?"
Mm.
I said, "There's nothing." He says, "Why are you so melancholic?
Yeah.
Why are you singing in such sad ways? What
That's
happened to
interesting.
you?"
His dad was a Scorpio, so
Right.
that's really a proper thing for him to do.
Now, this would
And
have
he would pick it up.
this was important, and this
Yeah.
obviously wasn't something that took place with what was her name?
Oh, Kaylee?
Her name was Kaylee?
Yeah, I think I may be pronouncing it. I think it was Kaylee. It's Kailia.
Kalia.
Right, and, but by the
But
way,
this must have happened to her where she was melancholic, but no one took notice. When my father came in, it was a rare occasion to hear my father talk to me directly about me, not about his tools and where his tools are.
yeah.
And,
You definitely had that experience that people were
Yeah.
interested in your feedback,
Well,
and parents were a little different anyway at that time. They didn't talk to kids like parents do now.
yeah, my father never spoke to us, but he spoke at that time to me.
Right.
And what it made me do is that all of a sudden I became aware that other people knew I existed.
You felt seen.
That someone was
Yeah.
there and saw me
Right.
and saw the very thing that
Right.
allowed me to stop and think,
Right.
was that necessary to alarm my father?
Right.
And it had me thinking about all my sadness all around. The other thing I did is
Did
I
you
wrote.
like when you were 16, you were kind of going through that experience?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I could put myself in the shoes of this
Yeah,
girl.
I mean, Michael didn't socialize like normal, like the people his age. I mean, it's funny because I don't even know how to describe him. Like all the hippies and everything, he was just working around the clock.
Right.
But he became an astrologer in 1972
Well,
anyway. He's an interesting fella.
the reason I can talk about this Kalia is that it's the similar combination.
Yeah.
Aries in a year of fire dog. This is exactly the same combination I have. So I can remember that I had great periods of aloneness, and I wrote a poem called Alone. And I described myself as someone who was alone. When I was in that mode, there was no one to understand me.
Right.
When I was alone. But because I wrote, I was able to treat myself as my friend.
Right. Oh, that's
And so
yeah.
I had someone to talk to.
Right.
But I can imagine the intensity when we're putting together these two signs, we end up with a lot of intensity that you wouldn't expect from the dog. The dog is usually
Right.
laid back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that may end up being another problem for the dog, that it's willing to suffer.
So do you think, Michael, that it would be accurate for me to say that really you having that sense of aloneness is also part of the process of an Aries dog into becoming?
Well,
But it's like you're kind of almost steeled to that place for a while so the growth can happen, but it's also difficult because people might not understand it or be able to see it correctly.
well, what I was bringing out was that this combination definitely can fall into deep sorrow and deep sadness
Yeah.
because it's got this intensity that the world
Yeah.
isn't quite ready for.
Right.
They
That's
need
true. Yeah.
they need someone that can take that energy and convert it into action for them. I had the other problem of having a mother who didn't think very highly of me, expected and demanded a lot from me. So I ultimately turned out to be very proficient in many, many areas of whatever I did in my life.
I still
Because,
think that she was jealous of him.
yeah, she certainly did not allow me to engage in things that would have helped me out of my depression. For
Mhm.
instance, uh, with my brother, she gave him uh, toys and she gave him musical instruments that he could play and art courses at home. And with me, I was the true artist. And I was the one that truly wanted to play musical instruments, but I was not allowed to, and therefore I didn't have any outlets. So the only outlet I really had was my poetry. But I was very fortunate, and I think this is where I might I've obviously came out of my depression in a way that Kalia was not able to.
Right.
I had teachers that loved me.
Right.
That was a very important thing.
Well, and I would really like to just also make the point that we all have our spiritual contracts. And a lot of times there are people that make decisions. Hi, Mo Runs. Oh, it's so good to see you. So people make decisions. Uh, I'm so sorry I lost my train where I was going with that. They make decisions.
Well, we're talking about how
I'll come back to that.
I did not I had avenues to express. They came as a result of my
Oh,
environment having
yes.
to acknowledge me.
Oh, yes. So what I wanted to say is, a lot of times people do come here for short stays. Sometimes a baby only lives 3 days. There's a lot of those things that happen as well. They're part of our soul contract with our larger spiritual family. So, in these situations, I always want us to understand that there's something for us to learn, but it's not about blame. That there's a way for us to heal through understanding how we process this information.
Well, again, getting back to this combination of Aries and the
Yeah,
dog, the Aries is a child.
right,
So where did the damage occur in this Aries girl?
right.
Obviously, probably after 5 years old, I would say, uh, she began to think of herself as apart from everything else. This is one problem with the Aries. The
Yeah,
strength of the Aries is that they have a lot of, they're very bold and they're very connected with their self, with who they think they are or what they think they're doing. They're willing to follow all the rules of society that may work to get them where they are either told that they should go or that themselves they themselves have figured out the direction they want to go. The problem is that unless someone shows them how to come out of their deep cave-like existence, they tend to stay in the cave. So
yeah,
even while they look like they're normal children doing everything everybody else is doing, no one knows that when they're looking at this Aries dog, that they're looking at a very lonely, lonely, lonely state of existence in the formative years. This is very important that they have interactions with adults that bring them out into the real world, into the world of the adult. I had that. I had my shop teacher who liked me because I was always very kind to my teachers. Is very very well disciplined,
yeah. We both loved our teachers, all of
and
them.
I always was favorable to my teachers. I took
Yeah,
a liking to them, rather than to make jokes about my teachers like most of the students did.
right.
And I remember my shop teacher. He wasn't just interested in the fact that I was good at my metal work. He knew that I was a background Italian, and he automatically, and I remember, I think he was German. He was a short guy, stocky, very, very nice man. And he would start talking to me about how did my parents raise crops, and would I give him some ideas. So I made it a mission to find out about plants because even though I would be the one that would do the garden for my mother, I didn't know about plants. Now the teacher is asking me questions. So I go back and get information from my mother, and I bring him plants and give him, tell him how we plant the plants and how we take care of the plants. This brought me out, and I couldn't stay locked up into my head because somebody came and they rattled my brain a little bit and wanted to know something, but it was with gentility, with love, with affection, with respect.
Right.
I found it interesting that my teacher was interested in something, my background, my Italian background, even though a lot of people raise crops. But at that age, I thought it was because I was Italian that he had come and asked me. But that was enough to make me see that there was something other than my deep thoughts. There was other things going on outside of me.
Sure.
I had teachers that loved me because I was Italian. I was a history teacher, and we were covering the Renaissance period.
Sure.
And the teacher, he was an Irish teacher, Mr. Oh, I'm trying to remember McCrory or McCrory. I forgot now the name, but I loved him. And every time he referred to me, he'd say, "Now, Michelangelo, I'm going to ask you a question." And he would call me Michelangelo because when we were
Oh,
doing history and we were going over the great Renaissance artists. So because my name was Michael, he would refer to me as Michelangelo. So that made me feel, wow, I'm an artist like Michelangelo. And that brought me out. So I had a math teacher, Mr. Rosen, who
mhm.
simply said, look, he tried to explain to me not to get too confused about mathematics. And he would show me it was very simple. But the fact is that he took the time out. It's as if I was very fortunate that along the way, I had a little help, but the little bit of help was supersonic for me because of there was starvation at home. I was not getting proper attention at home. I was getting everything negative. In fact, the very opposite. My father was not an evil man to me. He was a very kind human being, but had no real relationship with me. So I couldn't bond with him. And my mother was the one that was my enemy. And as my wife properly put it, she was probably jealous of me, but I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but that's another story. It's a family history. She hated my
I
father's
was
family,
thinking,
and I was named after my father's father.
I was thinking that what happens in school, and it doesn't always happen this way for everybody, but what's similar is when I go to school, what somebody is doing is they're teaching me patterning and a sense of order, and they're teaching me how to create it myself.
Well,
So
you grew up as a young dog.
I did. And I mean, I still had a pretty ordered life, but
But what I've seen of
right. But
pictures
I
of
always
you,
had a million questions.
well, one thing that I saw in your pictures,
But what I wanted to say is, also education for some people, it just gives us a sense of order, a way to organize information that's more predictable, something we can do something about because we can't do anything about what's going on in our home lives. So that would be one way to identify. I just thought that was
well,
interesting, but I
just
didn't even know
to,
we were going to go in this direction. But
well, we'll keep talking
I
about
think,
this
yeah.
girl Kalia and what
Well,
might have possessed her to
oh,
end her life.
well, just yeah.
Well, the first thing that would have possessed her was her youth.
Yeah, that's a rough age.
That's look, this is one of the problems with the youth because I think it's been studied that children, if they're that people, if they're going to commit suicide, it's usually in their teenage years. This is when they're most volatile. There's the most amount of pressure on them because
Yeah.
they have to get into the society, into the fiber of society, become part of. They
Right.
have to fit somewhere. The Aries is lonely.
Well, I thought when you talk about your high school or I mean, you really don't talk about friends very often,
No, I didn't have
but
friends.
but still everybody knew who you were and they liked you, but you weren't able to participate in, and I just think that's
Well, it
so
was my
interesting.
teachers that this is what I have to say. I did not have. This is another problem for the Aries. If they are, if they do not have an influence in their home or on a daily occurrence where there's somebody that's drawing them out and
Mhm.
showing them other aspects of life and what's
Right,
interesting and what's not and
right,
what's good and what's bad.
right.
They walk pretty much alone. I was always very, very much alone.
Yeah, you know what?
I knew a lot of people, but I was not con, con, I close friends with maybe one or two people that I know of at all the students that I went to school with. So that state of loneliness can easily send a man to despair. I committed suicide in many, many, many of my poetry, but I had the poetry and my writings were how I was able to escape the doom aspect of it.
I was gonna say, I think that part of how you get an Aries to trust you as well when you're giving them information is that you have to kind of figure out what their learning style is, and then you have to present it to them in nuts and bolts, flat,
Well,
period.
I'm going to put it to you as a psychologist put it to me, who worked with my family. As my younger brother decided the family needed help, everybody except him. So I was elected to go and translate for my mother and father, who didn't speak that well in English. When I went to see, his name was Shlomo Sachs, went to see him years later when he was working at another school here in Long Island. Uh, we talked about my life and my brothers and sisters and all. And my brother, Frank, younger brother, 10 years younger, he, we, he sort of uh, might have been a suicide. Well, he was suicidal. He tried to kill himself a few times. He eventually succeeded by overdosing. When I went to see Sloman Sachs said to me, he said, I worked with your family and I concluded that you would have been the one to have committed suicide because of the upbringing and the type of person that you are. This is interesting because the combination of Kalia and my combination are identical.
This is having a really emotional effect on you guys. He has tears in his eyes.
And the fact is that we have the Aries, which is single-minded at this point in time. It's very isolated. It feels completely alone. And I wrote poems to that effect, that I was completely alone, no one to talk to, no one to guide me when I feel this way. Uh, and the ingredient was that there had to be negativity at home for Kalia. There had to be some kind of negativity that went on, or at least it was imagined by her.
Right.
And
Yeah, this
so,
isn't a
and
commentary about
so
blame. It's just
the
the way that the information is organized
and
within her.
we have to lean more on the fact that she was
Only not
the
just
year of
maybe
the
the
year of
dog.
the month of Aries
Oh,
more
right,
than the year of the dog.
right.
Dogs are less likely to commit suicide because they are tenacious. They hold on. But the
Yeah, look at
Aries,
Charles Manson.
goes into his cave, and that's where he can literally die, be forgotten there. And when he goes to the cave, he is truly alone. He is more in solitude than any even of the the Shaolin monks of China or India, where they isolate themselves in caves. The Aries is in a cave that's far more intense than that. Their cave is almost permanent shut off. They shut off, they completely shut off to everybody. And the thing about them is that because they tend to be so singularity in their way, a parent may not even become aware that their child is in this extreme lonely place and feeling totally unnecessary. And this would be the Aries, because the Aries has to connect with someone, they have to bond with someone because they're children. And unless they have other children around, then the parents have to do the work. And in my case, I had plenty of children, but they were not helping me because they were all younger than me. So what did I have? I was fortunate that I ran across teachers that took a liking to me. And I remember the first time that I felt proud was with Mrs. Andresen or something like that. She was my third grade teacher, and she wrote a report card, and I was still not speaking English properly because I was born in Italy, but raised here. But it took a few years to start using English. And the teacher wrote home, and I could barely read it. Your son has outstanding achievements and has shown an incredible ability to progress. And I felt like $1,000,000. Like somebody recognized me. Somebody cared about me.
I wonder do you think that you could actually read that, what this teacher wrote, and understand it, and your mother couldn't?
No, my mother couldn't read.
Right, so
She
what I was
couldn't
gonna
read any language.
right, because
She didn't
he's
go to
so
school.
what you're considered first generation, right? Right, so he
Yes.
interpreted for his mom when he was a kid. He went to all like
Yeah.
the
I was
teachers' conferences and all of that. Yeah. So
I was first generation, and my father was second generation
oh yeah,
because he was born here.
right.
Excuse me for a minute.
So I wonder if the fact that your mom couldn't read what your teacher wrote, like, sort of gave you a layer of protection against her rejecting the comment because she doesn't understand the teacher and somebody who's a different kind of authority.
I came home and I showed it to my mother, and I said, "Look at what she said about me." And it didn't matter to my mother, but
Yeah.
it mattered to me. And all I knew was that I had seen an opening in the doorway. There was a way out of my
Well, I was just
my secret
saying,
place, my
do you
hiding
think
place.
also so, I mean, because now I'm bilingual too, but do you think also that being bilingual sort of gave you another layer of emotional protection and distance from your mother because 'cause you're capable of doing things that she can't?
Can you repeat that? I
It's
didn't.
okay, so I know it's a strange question, but I'm thinking about because language is really about psychology, right?
Okay.
And you're a bilingual child.
Hmm.
And so, as a bilingual child, do you think
Oh, I think that had a lot. That
it gave
contributed.
you a layer of distance and protection emotionally from your mother because you
Oh
could do
yeah,
things that she couldn't?
right. I knew English and she didn't.
Yeah, I just think that's remarkable
Well, that separated me.
because
So
my thought was when you said that, if if my mom would have seen a note like that and had not given a response to me, I would have been crushed, devastated. I would have felt like I didn't have the right to exist.
no, I was very
And
aware
right.
that.
And I wasn't bilingual as a child, so
That
that's why I was thinking of that.
no, what
Yeah.
became very obvious to me is that there was a great distinction between my mother and I, in that even though I didn't understand my teacher completely, I was moving in that direction of understanding another language. a language which would have been more important to me, and that separated me from my mother. So there were things that drew me out of my family scenario. That that sort of put a different angle on how I was interpreting things. In other words, there was always this a little bit of infusion of the world around me. I was not allowed by nature itself to go on feeling completely alone, even though that was the major theme in my life of being alone.
Huh.
I had that theme existed up until I went into the army.
And also, right, you have an Aquarian moon.
Hmm. Well, that would have allowed me to remain more comfortable with loneliness.
Yes.
The Aries loneliness
Ah,
is not necessarily a comfortable one because
right,
he's a child that wants to be seen and understood. He wants to be friends with someone.
right.
He wants others to touch him. He wants to feel how he's supposed to act as by sample, by or example. And the example has to come from people around him. And if they're not making that exchange, for instance, what might have been missing with Kalia was she wasn't getting the attention that she desired internally.
Or the feedback that she was actually seen.
Right,
If she just
right.
wasn't coming in, even if that was what was happening, it's she still wasn't experiencing it that
Yeah, the
way,
focus might have been on
which
how
is
great
really
of a
hard.
how great a musician she was
Right.
rather than how great she was.
I mean, and I'll say honestly with Michael, there have been times he gets triggered by something, he gets angry about something, and I've just said something very benign, I think. And I say to him, Michael, I don't understand what you're angry about because I'm not privy to what's going on inside of you, so I don't know how to remedy this. So,
Well, that is
right?
a problem with an Aries
Yeah,
because it's difficult to reach the inner Aries because the Aries has basically
right.
learned to be by
And
himself.
I'm saying I'm willing, and he's saying he doesn't care. You know, like, well,
Mm.
that's the only thing I got, buddy. You know, but
Well,
he comes around.
it's a response that's been learned
Yeah,
over the many years.
right.
That's the no one really wants to care. So
Ha,
why would I
right.
depend
Yeah.
on that when no one else has ever done that? Except again, the teachers had a way with me. I remember even Mr. Taylor, my French teacher.
Mm.
What I noticed is my teachers would pick me out as an important student, and I noticed that the others were not getting that, and um, I didn't feel like a show off, like the teachers preferred me. I was always somewhat confounded as to why the teachers were so palatable
Well,
to me.
I think especially because where you grew up, in the area you grew up in, I think that the teachers would find it particularly remarkable, you know, like I think that teachers always have the disposition of appreciating somebody who shows promise. So, and given what they had to work with, they then they would, you know, look at you and go, "Hey, that guy's going to get himself out of his situation." And that's nice.
Again,
Teachers are like that. That's why
again,
they're teachers. I mean, if they're gonna be teachers.
again, I can say I would have probably followed the path of Kalia and committing suicide because I led a life that approximated that kind of loneliness and despair. But unfortunately for the death, what is it, the man with that shows up at your death? There was a Mr.
What? The Grim Reaper?
The Grim Reaper, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, he couldn't have me because I constantly had a little bit of an input from many different
Oh,
teachers, constantly getting a little input. I had Mr. Lamberson who said one day he would read about my greatness. Unfortunately, he died because of heartbreak. His family he lost half of it in an accident and then eventually died.
you know, that makes me think of I can't believe we're going in this direction right now, but I can't help it. That makes me think of all the crazy accidents he's been in.
Oh yeah, I've had many
That he
accidents.
survived.
At least 3 or 4 of them, which I
Uh-huh.
should have completely dead. Definitely was supposed to be dead, especially the motorcycle accident. Then the car falling on my chest, and a tree hitting me in the face while I was up in the trees. And I think the fact that these teachers came along, it's almost as if they were guides in my life. So that's an astrological thing that should be measured when you read the
Well,
chart.
I was also thinking that, um, what's oh, darn it, I just had this was zipping through my mind as you were talking, like, the way that Aries
Well,
is.
bring it up when I'm talking. I don't mind being
Yeah.
interrupted.
No, 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 it just slipped me. I just had that just shoot through me and then slipped
Hmm.
again.
See,
The
what I see in you as a dog, that you're a Sag, and a Sag is a very different sign from Aries. That's why when it comes to
Oh, right.
Kalia, I would lean more on the fact that she was an Aries that might have caused the suicide more than the dog. The dog would have to be heartbroken completely. The Aries would have to just have been
Oh,
alone too
that's what I was
long.
gonna talk about this.
Uh, Carrie, when I
The
saw pictures of you, I can see how you were. You somehow were like a bubble that pushed yourself into society and made you nudged everybody around until you fit in and you made your presence there. And now you are going to find out what's going to happen. Is the balloon that you just pushed in there to fit, is it going to blow up? Or is it going to be contagious and get everybody excited around you? You look like the type of person that made things happen.
oh,
You made things happen. That's what I saw in pictures of you. So you
oh,
had
that's so
you had an ability to
very
keep,
romantic.
like a lot of children,
Uh-huh.
to generate the momentum to mingle and get involved. So there'd
Oh,
be less chance of you wanting to commit
I
suicide.
wanted to talk about oh gosh darn it, it comes up and then it leaves again. The
You have to just start talking about it.
I know
You're leaving it hanging.
I know there's a way the Aries oh, the Aries nature, being very swift moving. Oh, this is what it is. So they're not really into like they have friends, but they're not like major social butterflies. They like to, kind of
No,
one
at the end, there's no friend
right, kind of one
for the
person at a
Aries.
time. So
There's friends, but they're not friends
what's
because
interesting about that is that because they don't have all the chatter of society like everyone else does, they also that also prevents them from having fear in a way. They're more brave. They're more clear about what they're going to do when they're going into action because they don't have all this other clutter, chatter.
the Aries is courageous when it has to perform. When it does not have to
Right,
perform, it is very childlike
right. And there's a lot
and
of Aries
very
actors.
helpless.
Oh,
And I have to put the emphasis on helpless. Just because they're geared for war is not to dismiss the fact that when they have to fall back on who they fall into a deep hole that has no bottom, bottomless pit, because no one has reached out and said, hey, try some of this, be something like me. How about me? They don't have someone that challenges them to mingle with them. And as long as they're allowed to be alone, and that's what I think happened to Kalia, that she was allowed to be alone for too long, and no one was interested in waking her up and saying, where are you? Who are you? What do you want? What are you doing? I had teachers. I had my Mr. Lamberson, who, because the way I was able to understand the Iliad that we were going through, he came up to me and he said, do you write poetry? And I said, yes. He says, I want to see your
well,
poetry.
and
Now,
I
this is the kind of thing, this is a teacher that we considered, he was the head of the theater.
but
He was a literature a teacher, and he was very disciplined and but he picked me out of all the people in the class. And I still, Mrs. Buckwald, I could tell you the teachers that made me feel like, oh, maybe loneliness is not, I'm not really alone.
Right.
And it was just a little bit, I didn't get enough of it daily, but I got just enough to make me interested in something outside myself. And I think what happened with Kalia is she
Well,
saw herself abandoned and without
and
anything.
what's important to say about that, because that can really be misinterpreted, is that that could be a split second because of the combination Aries fire dog, that deep, deep, deep position where she's unreachable could literally be just a split second for her because of the Aries nature. And then that's it. That's not something that is necessarily groomed, none of
Well,
those things. It comes with the way that they process information.
you mentioned unreachable,
And
unreachable.
right, and it could just be for a split second, and that's what I wanted to.
Aries is reachable.
Oh, they are,
The
they are.
problem with the Aries is that unless someone makes them included with whatever's going on around them, the Aryan will automatically feel excluded because he sees himself as an island. Just like the Aquarian, there is a lot of there's similarities between a dragon and a tiger, or
Right.
Aries and Aquarius. The sense of being alone because their feelings are usually very strong, their thoughts are very strong, but they have no access to express. And unless someone comes in there and says, "Hey, you in there, wake up, we're here together, and this is what's expected of you," then the Aries goes on believing that, well, I must have been left out, and I am left out, and there is no room for me. And no one is taking the time to challenge me, to show me, hey, you can do this or you can do that. Just as I had teachers coming around, and some of the challenges were by augmenting me, by bragging about me, or by saying things. What's the word when you say things to make people feel a little more self-empowered?
Or just
Uh,
empowering, saying empowering.
well, they make comments that
Compliment?
the compliments, right? Compliments. I had this from various teachers, and it's funny, from all different disciplines of education: shop teacher, English teacher, mathematical teacher, uh, my homeroom teacher picked me out to talk to me. Uh, everybody left the homeroom because we used to have to report in homeroom, and then we had to be dismissed from the homeroom.
Huh.
We would go to other classes, and then we end up back in homeroom. And I remember Mrs. Olansky, we talked and talked, and I told her the story of the creature that I saw in the church. And she told Mr. Madison, who was the principal. And I was scared when he had walked in to say hello to her while I was still in class, after class, talking to my teacher. And she decided to tell him about this creature. And he looked at her like she was crazy. And I could tell. And I knew that people would think I was crazy because no one can believe a story like I told, but I was able to prove that what I told was right because there was three people who saw this creature before me. And I just remembered that my teacher felt that I was being telling the truth, and and she liked me because she felt that I was someone who was kind. And well, that was the other thing. I think the teachers gravitated towards me because I was not the yapping type. I did not chatter a lot. I was very quiet in my seat, and I paid a lot of attention to my teachers, and the teachers noticed that I paid a
Hi,
lot of
Sylvia.
attention.
Thanks for coming.
And I remember my teacher at Hofstra, the university, was giving me lousy grades until the time came for the finals. And I didn't know what I was doing wrong in my philosophy class, but I wasn't getting the grades that I thought I would.
Huh.
And then at the end of the final,
Those are the best courses.
the teacher said, "You have to answer this question." You have to tell me why you deserve an A. And I just said, and he said, and you have to answer the question, otherwise it's an automatic failure. I didn't want to answer the question because I didn't think I deserved an A. But because I had to answer the question, I gave
Yes.
it everything I knew. Here are the reasons. And I enumerated them. I had I had joined the class to learn something about the history of man. I came and I attended the classes. I listened to all the lectures. I took all the notes that I could. I read my notes. I read my assignments. I performed my assignments. So today I can say, after taking this course for 2 or 3 months, that I am a different person than I was when I came here, that I have grown to some extent to understand something more about my nature and the nature of man. And Lord and behold, I got an A for the course
That's nice.
when I had no A's in any of my tests. In fact, I had some D's, C's, and once in a while a B. But I got A for the course. And I went and I spoke to Dr. Cernick, the teacher. And again, this was where a teacher took notice of me. And the teacher said, I was having a lot of problems reading your assignments. I couldn't understand you. But when you gave that answer in the final course, he said, I understood one thing. You gained everything that this course was intended to give. So again, once again, a teacher comes into my life to wake up in me that there's something that they valued that's alive and it's well in me. I think Kalia
Yeah.
never had this. Kalia probably was a good musician, but that was all she had.
She's a contortionist.
That was all she had to feel good
Amazing.
about herself. And music oftentimes is a melancholic way of dying. Music can be so beautiful and sweet. It's like the nectar that poisons you. It's sweet, but it can promote more and more loneliness, because when you get into that state of music, at least for me,
Ugh.
it was a way to escape. And what happened to Kalia, she thought that that was a better way to go. A better place to go was to go with her music, which would have to have a sweet ending. And I think people who commit suicide are looking for a sweet ending. I think that's what they're looking for. And that's what Kalia found. And so astrologically, it
Interesting.
would have happened because Aries was pronounced. The dog, the only thing that I would say that the dog had to do to contribute to this was that the dog is somewhat passive when it comes to self-reward. Uh, you're going to have dogs that are either obnoxiously narcissistic,
Right.
or the majority of them are going to be quiet and separate from the mainframe of society, because they're animals that are to be seen but not heard. Dogs are servants.
I'm thinking also about what really happens when an animal that lives in reality in its heart demands to be expressed to something that can really only take on so much and still has to have its own reality. I think that by itself is difficult to process. Don't you?
Well, you're trying to get into by going in this direction, you're talking about getting into this girl's head.
I mean, even me, because I'm a Sagittarius, like I have a realistic aspect, that goes, okay, Sag, we're going to use our bigness in this way, and we're going to do it this way.
Well, look,
And but yeah,
we're talking
it's
about suicide.
and even yeah, right.
And when we're talking about suicide, we have to understand
Oh,
that we're
I mean,
looking at that this is a choice that somebody makes because they believe that's the best choice. There is no other real
right,
choice,
right,
or that other choices that they've made have failed
right,
to acquire what they wanted.
right.
The other problem, and we don't know this, Kalia, is that she could have been more aggressive in her attitude to commit suicide. In other words, there was a certain
That's what
anger.
I'm talking
There was a
about.
certain anger that she was brought to this kind of helplessness, this sense of having no worth or little worth, or that she had no position in society. She doesn't have a place where she belonged. Obviously, she was looking for something more than what she was getting. So apparently, this environment was not rewarding her. And the environment would start off with their parents, the teachers, the friends, and the social climate that was around her. Apparently, none of those uh, components were able to distract her from her loneliness. And there must have also been a certain um,
And
dislike
not for
for,
lack of trying, not for lack of trying, by the way.
there had to be a certain amount of dislike for herself. In order to commit suicide, you have to believe that the self is not worthy of having a life, that you're making this major decision that the self needs to cease. So the self has decided that it has a terminal clause that it has to obey, and no one was there to offset that direction that was being repeated in her head over and over again. So the Aries,
Well,
the Aries
right.
carried on like what she was, a single component,
We'll
alone with no
right.
one around.
We'll find out more as time goes on. I didn't expect any of us to go in this direction. It,
Well, do you want to say anything more about her,
no, I
other than
just
that
can.
it's sad?
I'm surprised how incredibly moved you were by it. You know,
Yeah.
that really brought up a lot of stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
it reminded me of what I was going through from the time I would say it was 11, 12 till about 16, 17 years old, 18. And then I went into the army at 17, and that kind of changed everything.
Right. Well,
There was no more time for loneliness in the army.
I always believe with these young types, the most important part is that they came here to bless us in some way. Unfortunately, it could be through grief, and the lessons that we learned from all of this. That's what's most important. That's what their mission was,
Well, I'd like to make a
and
comment
may they
on
travel light and
I'd like to make a comment on
always
the
have
idea
peace.
of suicide. I don't look at suicide as a very evil thing.
No,
I've certainly, now I'm 76 years old. I've have a little bit of background in reaching periods of time when I wanted to die, uh, even way after I left my teenage years, when I had other sorrows like losing marriages and uh, getting misunderstood by people that I worked hard to provide support to. I don't. I looked at suicide and always wondered why society has such a reaction to it. And I agree that our first law is to survive. The first law of nature is that the organ is born, and the first thing the organ must do is find shelter, food, and company, someone to promote, to share. All animals need to have some kind of a.
I
So,
was just thinking of Jefferson Airplane.
and I'm looking at suicide as something that's part of nature. It's part of our being. Who said that every one of us that are born must stay tied to our
Whoa.
destiny? Who made that a fact? Where do we have that instruction? I've looked for it all this time, and I think it goes back to ancient writings and ancient religious practices that suicide was a terrible thing. I wonder whether or not this is the way we thought millenniums of years ago, the thousands and thousands of years ago, when other societies existed here. Suicide is just another experience of life. I don't see why such a terrible thing is made of by society. I believe I can intellectually
More
understand why.
let me frame this for a moment in this way. It's horrible and tragic and heartbreaking, and we never want it to happen. But in terms of it being stigmatized, it doesn't help us process or understand it. I think that's
Well,
really right.
I didn't feel
I really
too.
think that's how what you're really
Yeah,
saying.
I don't feel a negative things towards this Kalia.
Or judgment, yeah.
I don't feel that she did anything wrong. Suicide is just, I think the reason why it has such a negative connotation is because society created a rule.
Oh, yeah.
Let's understand, society has to support itself.
Right, Mo
Children
runs
are born. You need to have parents that stick around and raise those children.
right.
Society means that if a man commits suicide, that he may be the breadwinner and there's no other way to support his family. So we outlaw the suicide so that that man goes to work and takes care of his family. And that might be why society has such a negative reaction towards suicide.
Well, yeah, yeah, what you're talking about is the stigma.
But it's based on a financial problem that if a man dies and he's the sole support of his family, which it used to always be that way, then society's going to say, no, you can't commit suicide. You can't leave your kids behind. And that's why it's so negative. Otherwise, is it really negative? In the eyes of nature,
Right, yeah,
in the eyes of nature, it is not negative.
right,
It's one of the many possibilities. We're born with choices.
right.
And why
Well,
all of a sudden we get to suicide and that becomes a no, no, no. But stealing from your neighbors is not a no, 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 because too many people do that right now. Whether you say they got real jobs or fake jobs, what I see is that more than half of the society is stealing from one another, and they all believe it's okay because they'll take jobs where they know that the job itself or the company itself is involved in wrongdoings. And the wrongdoings that always means that somebody's taking something from somebody else, always. So we as a society are very dualistic. It's wrong to kill yourself because that would mean society is left to support the children you left behind. And so society says no. But nature says you can. And if you want to, you should.
whew, that's a very Aquarian moon comment right now.
That's my attitude about it. That suicide is just another form of existence. You terminate it. Now, who is to say that it's all over? No one. That's another problem.
Well, I
No
think
one can prove that you've done anything evil by
right.
dying.
I think part of it too is that we have to be able to elevate our consciousness to a
But
degree
that's the
that we can start interpreting the more subtle
that's
aspects.
our higher attributes as a society.
Right.
That's the positive side. But as I just said, while we go around sounding off real good about how we are supposed to love each other and care about each other and support one another, and at least half of the population, and I'd like to say more like 80%, are abusing one another because they take on jobs that will lead to some kind of criminal activity. Just about all of these jobs. And the ones that don't lead you to criminal activity, there's no pay. There's no
Right.
pay.
Yeah.
And there's no way to survive. And so a man decides it's better to kill himself.
Yeah, society doesn't value people who actually contribute to society.
And he has a right to kill himself. That's the attitude I have. I don't condone it. And I don't believe that that's the first avenue to take. And I don't believe that you should contemplate suicide without first taking a look at all your other options. That intelligence forces you to look at all other options. And that's a person who's more complete. So I went through all of these depressed things that, like Kalia did, but I didn't come out with the solution that I had to commit suicide. In the first place, I was too aware. And Kalia obviously was removed from stimulation from a society, stimulation from that other animals, pets, trees, plants, flowers, vegetables, um, ponds, riversides, um, oceans, mountains, valleys, woods, all these things that nature has to tell you, look, I'm here. No, no, I'm here. No, no, I'm here. No, find me here. No, find me here. And each place that you looked was more rewarding than the next or than the previous. And that was a way for the individual to acclimate himself within himself, to register how he felt when he walked into a forest, or when he saw a wild animal for the first time, or when he saw a fish jumping out of the water and the clear water moving and the cool water against his flesh when he was too hot and he jumped in the pool or the puddle or whatever. These are all different stimulus given by nature to say, here's what I offer you. And poor Kalia apparently never got there because she might have been raised in an environment where the only thing she saw between school and home was the classroom and the bedroom. So she was in the classroom, she was allowed to be alone, or she managed to be alone.
Well, she's famous. She's famous on from
From
toddlers.
about 2006, how famous could she be?
She's from Toddlers and Tiaras. I don't exactly know, but she was a
Well,
performer.
2006 would have made her
Yeah, when she was a little girl, she became famous as a little girl.
barely 12 years, what, 12 years old?
Yeah, she actually became famous. I thought it was
All
interesting.
right, but that famous at 12 years old is
Listen,
nothing.
wait, listen. I believe she became famous at 5 years old, and I thought it was interesting that you actually made the comment that around 5 years old, something transitions.
But this
Uh,
kind of famous was not
and that's Toddlers and Tiaras, and
the
it's about beauty
fame.
and
The
performing, and yeah.
fame went to the parents, not to her. To her, it was a make-believe world. The emphasis was on the music she played, not who she was.
Yeah, well, she was a contortionist.
What the heck is a contortionist?
There's somebody that's super flexible that can bend themselves in a lot of shapes and sizes.
Well, how does that help her?
No, that was one of her talents. She became
How does
famous.
it help her to integrate with other people? This is what I'm driving at here.
Oh, no,
We're talking about suicide.
yeah.
Suicide means you have nothing left. So I
Or
don't
you-
care if you're a contortionist, if you're a mimer, if
Yeah.
you're a comedian.
Right.
If you're alone, look at the fellow what's his name that used to be on the comedian, the cancer pig. He committed suicide. He was always doing comedies, playing the woman, and he played as a woman in one of his movies. I can't think of his name. He just recently killed himself a few years ago.
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
Well, I can't think of other movies that he played. Well, he played in one movie where he played as the companion of a woman pretending that he was a woman too, and they were
Wait, was he? Hold on, I'm confused. Was he in Tu Wong Fu?
no, not the Chinese movies.
Oh, no, it wasn't Chinese. It was three drag queens.
No, no, no,
Okay.
no, no, no. No, this is where he.
My friend played a cameo in that.
Well, he also played as a woman who was he was really being a cleaning woman for his family because he was thrown out of the house, and he came back he was come back dressed up as a woman, and until he's found out, uh, he he was on Saturday Night Live. That's where they found him.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm not sure.
yeah, he was Saturday Night Live, and
John Belushi?
no, but he knew them.
John Candy?
No, he knew him too. You remember I used to tell you I didn't like him. He was always He was
This is
always
such a
very
weird
weird.
conversation.
He was a very always trying to be too prissy, too nice. And he played in Julambi, or whatever it was, where they go into the. Yeah,
Jumanji?
he was the first one to play into that. He was the guy that they found.
Are you
Jumanji.
talking about Robin Williams?
Yes,
No,
Robin
he's a
Williams.
Cancer cat, a
I
51.
said Cancer.
No, he's the year of the cat, not a pig.
Oh, well, he's the year of the cat, right? The year of the cat.
Oh, that makes sense.
Well,
Oh, yeah, he
he
he was
commits
really
suicide,
so connected to people too.
but he
It's
was
mind-blowing.
lonely.
Right,
And
right.
what I'm saying is that there's a part of the mind that can extract itself from everything else. And when you're allowed to do that, you have to have people around you who are very sensitive to know that something was going on. For instance, my teachers might have known that I had a lot of loneliness, and they just naturally gravitated towards me
Yeah, because
as
they're kind
a
of
as a kind of
trained to
like
see it. Yeah,
almost a psychic duty of theirs that
right. That's that
they
subtle
had
realm.
to fulfill
Yeah,
something they had that would help me.
right.
And I had that input, little, not much, not enough of it, but consistently throughout my period of
Well, I think what's crazy also, again, I don't think we're going to go in this direction though, is you got to talk about the car accident. You got to talk about the car falling on your chest.
You want me to talk about that?
Well, wait, you had a motorcycle accident
Yeah,
first, right?
yeah,
Talk about
yeah, yeah.
that.
What for?
Because I just also, because there's always this tendency for an Aries to be like in a big situation. Like throughout your life, you've had some pretty interesting.
I had, yes, it started with my mother dropping me out of a tree when I was about 2 or 3 months old. That's
And
where it started.
right. And then and then
And then I got a
I mean
burn on my
it
arm in
just
which I was
comes.
supposed to die from
Yeah.
the burn all the way across my arm. Uh, and then I was almost blown out of a ship when I was coming to the United States.
That's good.
And it was a 12-year-old who grabbed me by my feet
He was
as
a
I
little
was
airy boy.
as I was airborne going out of the pilot hole and into the ocean. And the girl just happened to turn around in time to see my feet and grabbed my feet and pulled me back in. And that was when I was only 5 years old. So I'd already had a little bit of history by the time I was 5 years old. Uh, then I got here and I had
Where did I say your
some.
K2 was? Keep
Well,
going.
K2 is Sagittarius in
No,
my
in
Western
in the
zodiac.
Vedic, I gotta look at your K2 in Vedic.
And
Keep talking.
Vedic, K2 is still in Gemini, I
Oh,
think.
let me
I
see.
still
Let me
have,
see.
I
No, I
think
think
there's,
your Rahu's in Gemini.
I mean, Rahu and K2 is still in
So K2 would
Sagittarius.
be in Sagittarius.
It's still there in
Right,
both
yeah.
systems, in both East and Western
Right.
systems. But getting back to this Aries nature, the Aries could have also deliberately made
Oh,
herself
yeah.
isolated because she might have also taken the attitude that nobody around her was actually worth her time. So you have a possibility of extreme isolationism, a certain sense of uh, narcissism. This was also part of her makeup because narcissism can lead to suicide. You have to say that the person is too important for others to come near it. So you remove the self away from everybody else. So this might have been her way of attacking those who were giving her attention for everything but who she was. She was getting all this attention because of her abilities, and none were to reach out and find out what was important inside her, what made her glow, what made her feel moved and wanted by others. This is something that was obviously lacking. And so you combine that with a sense of self importance. So she decided she was important enough to decide to end her life. This happens with people, and it transcends astrological parameters. Although astrology can explain how
Ah,
one got there, the dynamics, the dynamics of an Aries to commit suicide is that the Aries has seen itself as a total island.
I
It
have to
makes
tell you
Aquarius look,
something very interesting. Yep, Robin Williams. I have to tell you something. I just looked at now looking at his Vedic chart, his Jyotish. You have K2 in your fifth house
you know,
in Mula, which is also ruled by K2. So your creative and also represents roots and connectedness. So in your fifth house with K2, for example, like there would be an absence of biological children.
it's my fifth house Sagittarius.
Your fifth house is Sagittarius.
Okay.
There would be an absence of connectedness. There would be a tendency for danger in the meantime of being creative. Also, there is a feeling of having to separate from your roots in order to pursue your endeavors.
Hmm.
Right? There's that K2. It's really spiritual. And in opposition to that is Gemini, your 11th house, which is Rahu, Saturn, and Mars conjunct. So you have a tendency for somewhat rapid mobility when you are involved with older masculine men.
Hmm.
Um, that's really and that's your environment, your associates, and your friends. So I just think what I think about is just looking at that is the way that you end up being in danger is through your creative endeavors. But you always overcome it. That's why you have Rahu in the 11th house. It's kind of like,
Hmm. Well,
I,
there's something positive with the environment because it's the third house is environment.
mhm.
Um, so in any event, so
Yeah.
now we're looking at someone who might have felt herself too important to let society enjoy her. This could have been an aggressive action, not a sorrowful action. In other words, the suicide
Oh, no.
might have been something which she had planned on and thought it being the way to deal with all these people that are looking at her from the superficial
Huh.
point of from what she could
Oh,
achieve as an artist rather than who she was as a person. There
right.
was very little there, so she didn't have a lot to give up. She was taking something away from society, her talent.
Oh,
That's what she was doing. So it was a selfish act, and then with Aries, it would have to be a selfish act. We don't want to just look at everything as a poor child. This is also a monster child, a child who's
Michael.
decided, well, one of the things that I know have angered most everybody that I've ever met in my life. I'm fortunate that most of the people that I know have valued me, but an awful lot of them, an awful lot, too much to be comfortable, have looked at me as negative because I tell the truth. So when I said that she may have planned this and it was an action to attack her society by removing herself, I, I mean what I say because I think of the Aries and the Aries nature when it's decided it's isolated, it's decided that it's too good. Nobody else wants it, then I'm no good for them or they're no good for me. And if I'm no good to them because I decided that this is the way the Aries would be thinking, then I've concluded after observing everybody around me that they're not really worthy of me, then it's okay to get rid of me. So this was poor thinking, very bad logic, and a very self-centered person. She may have been wonderful. If I had met her, she would not have been dead today. I guarantee you that because I know I could have reached her.
She's right. She's also an incredibly sweet person.
Right, but
She I mean, I've seen
but
her.
behind that sweetness was an anger that she could not resolve,
Right.
and that anger
Well,
was
because she's
towards
16, she's an adolescent.
and that
Yeah,
anger was towards herself. That's what caused
yeah.
the suicide. That's all it takes to go to suicide, is to turn the anger that
Oh,
is
man.
rightfully belongs to others, that you should be angry at others, and you see that you can't make any headway with that way, so you turn it on yourself. You turn the anger towards yourself,
Yeah.
and then you say, "Well, what the hell am I doing here?" And you make the fatal decision to end your life. Now, again, I think ending a life is part of the natural norm of life itself. To be alive is also to know that you are rapidly moving to your death. So, who cares if you do it at 16 or you do it at 61 or at 161? This is not important. What's important is that this is the cycle of life. The cycle of life is to be born for the purpose of dying. So we'll discuss astrology because it's an interesting way to interpret how this person got there. As I've just now, I think, delineated that Kalia got there because the Aries allowed her to remain single minded, to remain incubated in her little self-made cave where the dragon lives. Let's keep in mind, the Chinese weren't stupid when they decided that Aries is the month of the dragon. And the dragon lives alone and excluded. And Aries is alone. When he comes out, he causes life, he causes activity, he causes commotion. Then he goes back to the cave and he's got nothing to do. So the Aries has a complicated life ahead of himself, and it's a challenge. And all he needed was friends that he could play with, she could have played with. She needed to play with the mud and with the clay, and more than just be involved with instruments and
Oh,
exercise.
nice. Moran said, she said, I think the purpose of life is for your soul to learn and ascend.
Oh, of course,
Absolutely.
of course. But how does one learn and ascend? It's different for each individual. Each individual has a time clock within them that says, I've learned or I am going to learn more. I always had more questions than I had answers. I could not die until I fulfilled the questions. And here I am at 76, not knowing when I'm going to go to the other side, because my family history is the males never lived much beyond 70, and I'm 76. The males from my mother's side, that is. I mean, from my father's side. Uh, so this whole idea of living to discover, yes, but what happens when all the attention is placed on your ability to do music and to this whatever this exercise that she did? When
Proportions.
all of the attention was placed there instead of who she is and what she is, if she was allowed to be on a farm and touch farm animals and touch wild mushrooms and pick up toads and then get the urine over their hands and be told that they're going to become midgets because of the urine. These are the kinds of things that children have to grow up with, the magic of life. Apparently, she didn't have enough of that because she decided she had enough. And what was enough? What her parents caused her to do, to become a great musician. And what's the word of the other one?
No, I don't think that she was a
You said that
musician.
she did these flexible. She was
She's a contortionist. Yeah, I don't know all of her talents. I'm not sure. I think she was a dancer. I don't know
a
if she's a,
dancer or
yeah.
whatever. So the emphasis was all put on what's on the outside
Uh-huh.
rather than on what was inside sparking that. Was anybody looking inside and saying, oh, she has this potential, she has that potential?
Right.
Or tell me how your parents put the plants in, what they do to prepare a plant for gardening, because I want to do a garden. And these are teachers confide in me, and I'm saying, oh my God, I have special knowledge I can bring to other people.
Yeah, that's nice.
And it's not over. I got a lot of things that people are expecting things from me. And once I thought that, then I had to start thinking how I can perform. Apparently, Kalia did not have this experience.
Right.
She was
Again, that's
told.
the age.
She
The
was
age
told
doesn't
to.
allow it.
She was told to perform rather than to be asked and to find out what do you like, what do your parents like. If she had learned her instruments because people asked, could you show me how to play an instrument because I know your mother has the equipment at home, then she would have thought, I can bring something over to my friend and I want to know. Instead, she was told by the parents, do this, even though the parents didn't do any of that. The parents were shallow. They weren't the creative ones. You understand? They weren't the creative ones, so they could never bring out the creativity in her. All they could do is make her do certain things by the numbers. And this is an example of someone who was everything was rote. Everything was taught in a rote way. She had to memorize everything. It couldn't be coming out of her own soul. Where I had all this time to write my poetry with no one interfering, with no one getting in the way and telling me, oh, you're going this way or that way or
Oh,
whatever.
that's interesting.
What time is it?
We're oh,
I'll find out.
oh, 3:33.
3:33?
Oh, more ones. It would be interesting to look into her parents.
3:33.
Were they failed
we're
actors placing
finished.
their ambitions on their child? So sad.
It's
Yeah,
finished.
3:33. Yeah.
2 to 3 is already.
Oh, we're past it, but we're just hanging out and having a conversation. So
Oh, you want to hang out?
we were, yeah. Yeah, so Moran said it would be interesting to look into her parents where they failed actors placing their ambitions on their child. So sad.
What? You're reading too fast.
So it would be interesting to look into her parents where they failed actors placing their ambition on their child. So sad.
Oh, definitely. That we don't know enough about the history of this child.
I really hesitate, like for me.
I do know that this Aries dog combination is a very nice one. I've met a few
Right.
Aries with a
They
dog.
are. They're very
I was
sweet.
in love with a girl she was married, and unfortunately I couldn't. She was born the same day as me, March 29th, but 12 years younger than me. And I was really attracted to her, and she was attracted to me. And we remained to be very, very close friends because we had the same birthday. But the Aries dog combination is a very, very pleasant combination. You have to really hurt them badly to get a negative response from them.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that this girl was probably very tender in many ways. That she was probably this product of suicide resulted more out of loneliness, despair, and a feeling that she was being used.
Oh, she's in the Andromeda
She
portion,
was.
right?
What's her birthday?
April 19th.
Oh yeah, she's Andromeda.
Damsel in distress.
The damsel in distress. So she is being put on the chopping block to be sacrificed. So Andromeda has a problem that they're going to be used as a sacrifice, and this is astrologically this is very important because this is probably the root cause. She's Andromeda. She expects to be destroyed, and the destruction came from her. The attention, this big to do about her music,
Right.
rather than who she was.
Well, and I also have to say, emphasize that when we have a spiritual contract, we're going to also come in beneath or with certain astrological combinations that are going to support that event as well. It isn't, you know what I mean? It's not even necessarily cause and effect. We make the soul contract. We can just kind of got to take a look at that. We need this experience because this is how it's going to benefit the world in this particular way, and this is our role.
Well, I might be going out on a limb, but I have a feeling that This was set up by the family without them knowing. They really set up her demise. And the way they did it is that all the attention
Man,
was
I
on
I
what,
I really hate to say that to somebody whose parents are grieving.
well,
I mean,
so
that's
they're grieving, but that doesn't mean that they didn't contribute to this.
oh, well, everybody contributes to something.
I didn't say they did. I said
Right,
this is probably resulting from something the parents
right.
accomplished.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I always felt pressure when
I
that
say that on
age.
the basis that I know is truth, and the truth is that she was a famous musician.
Uh,
How do you become a famous musician when you're barely 12 years old? And this happened to many of children,
yeah, child
where
stars.
the parents have poured all the value into what they can get out of the child rather than what they can give the child. You see, I had a lot of experiences of people giving me something, even by, I don't want to use the word accident because it doesn't really fulfill the transaction, but by consequence, there was always something coming to me that showed me something important inside me. I think with Kalia, the emphasis was always on her performance, what they could take out of her, rather than who is she? What does she think? Did they have her sit with groups and discuss her experiences and her loves and her hates and her worries and her excitements? In my mind, I think that she was isolated too much, allowed to remain in this mind of separation. Andromeda already fearing that there's danger, that they're going to somehow be sacrificed. And in some way, she was being sacrificed because they wanted what she had and they didn't want to give what she needed. And what she needed? Communication. Why are we born with one another? To get company. Man is born, and the first thing he wants is a mate. He wants company. First thing, has to have a mate. Then he has to have a place, a source to eat.
Mo
And
Run
and,
says,
and
Michael, you are so correct.
who?
Mo Runs is saying, Michael, you are so correct. She's
Oh,
doubling down with you.
oh, very good. Okay. So I feel bad for the fact that she died. It's a soul. And we as souls, if we ever get there in our society, to remember that our purpose in life is to support one another. Human beings are to support one another.
Yeah, I
We're
just,
not here to steal from one
oh,
another. And that's the problem with humanity today. And I will say 80% of the world's population is either directly or indirectly involved in the exploitation of his fellow man, his neighbor that's across the street from him.
right, inadvertently,
Yeah,
yes.
it doesn't have to be done directly. Just because we work for an employer that steals doesn't mean that we're not part of the problem.
Right.
If my employer is stealing, that means that he's giving me dirty money.
We have to become dependent on
And then
thieves.
if I know
Right.
anything about his doings, he'll give me a favor. He'll make me a favor and give me more so I can keep my mouth shut. So we wind up stealing. People who make 100 times what another person is making, that person can be easily seen as a thief. Because if he was being fair,
And I
he would
think
have,
Bernie Sanders said actually it was like 33,000 times more than the lowest
all
paid
right,
employee
well,
now. Like,
I'm
it's
not,
gone to that
I'm
extreme.
understating it just so that my point stays solid.
So
The
crazy.
fact of the matter is that when you go home with an unfair amount of money, you know that you're not that much better than every other human being around you. So why are you reaping 100, 200, 300 times more than the fellow man around you? How can you permit that? But by keeping that job, you are also keeping the thief who's causing that, and you're enjoying at the banquet of that thief. because he is making that all possible because he steals. And we are, of course, I'm talking to small timers, people that are making millions, because today millions is not anything anymore. It's trillions. So think about
Michael should
that.
write music. Maybe that's what I'll do. Have him write some songs.
I would have been a good musician
But you can still write songs.
and a good artist. I did all of those things, but my life was changing hats all the time. I changed hats and I made money every kind of way you can imagine.
Well,
And I didn't do anything ever. Well, I did get involved with one group of people
what I
doing the
was
wrong
listening
thing.
to is there's a poetic way that you describe certain things, and I was just thinking, we don't really have music that represents anything anymore,
Mm.
or um, right now what's really popular, which is fine with me, is a lot of Latin music and a lot of rap. But it's hard for me to follow and
Well,
understand.
I'm still a
And
good.
but the thing is that when I think about really all the music that was written in the 70s, all the music that was written in the 60s, and I'm listening to it, I just realized that kind of what's missing from us, from this generation, I'm just going in this crazy direction. This is what I was thinking of, is that we don't have music to move us. We don't have music to connect us. Like there was still a time in our lives where if we were sitting in a bar and, it was a cowboy and a businessman and some punk rock or alternative, whatever, there was always a way to put a song on that connected everybody. So
Well,
and I just and now we don't even have that. But when you were speaking, I was like, that would actually be a beautiful song. Maybe we can like liven up folk
well, to
music
give you
again
an
or something.
idea of what I think is beautiful, because it covers the whole gambit of what the human experience should involve or should account for. And then I think of people may not like the song because it doesn't send shivers up their spines and it doesn't cause their knees to get weak and their desires to dance around with beers in their mouths. But I think of Frankie Valli's song
It's
"To Give," and I think of the song by Frankie Valli. It's sung solely by him. No, the band is not included, and the song is called "To Give."
By the way, Frankie Valli,
He's a
1934
dog.
Taurus dog.
Now, to give,
I swear to God, it's going to be the dog
yeah,
astrology channel. We're so bad,
to give
but it
is
just
a song that if more people listen to it, we would have the ideal of what human life is supposed to be about. I care for a lot of other different music. I care for music that I like songs that you can dance by. I don't like songs that make noise. It means that between the sounds, there's something going on that's disturbing. But I like music in which I don't care how loud it is, but if it's connected, one instrument is connected with another, I have no problem. But when I hear a guitar screeching out of nowhere and it's blasting over everybody else's heads, that to me is garbage. It's not music, it's noise. In any
well,
event,
to me, that's still better than what we have now because it was relatable for some
I wanted
people.
to add one more thing about Kalia. She happened to be a musician.
I don't know that she was a musician, Michael. I didn't
Well,
say
you
she
told me
was.
that she was famous. So maybe
She is.
did
She
you give me
was.
the wrong information
I'm
about
not
her?
sure that she was dance. She's a dance. I like she was a dancer and a contortionist, and I'm not sure what
Well, you
else
started
besides
off to me telling me she was
famous. In
famous.
top from toddlers and tiaras. Yeah.
To do what?
I just maybe as a dancer and a performer, she's just a performer in general. I don't know
Well,
everything
all
that she
right.
did.
Now, then I'm going to just slightly modify my statement. I was about to say musicians, but performers in general.
Yeah.
They're very similar to the same thing with musicians because
Right.
they're performers.
Right.
And they tend to be amongst the highest number of people committing suicide.
Yeah, because they're so highly
Besides the
sensitive.
fact that the adolescent is number one,
Mhm.
number two would be the entertainer
Right.
because they're so busy putting on an act that no one really wants to know who they are, don't want to know. And they apparently don't have enough company to bring that out. What was the problem with Robin Williams? He was lonely. That was what they claimed about him.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that got involved in all kinds of movies that I don't even know how he qualified. I didn't.
Yeah, he's deeply
I
compassionate.
wasn't crazy mad about his acting. Some
You
of
know what
his
I think is
acting.
interesting is that also, in that regard, George Michael, who's 12 years younger than Robin Williams, also a Cancer year of the cat.
Who?
George Michael, you don't really know him. He was more my generation,
George
80s
Michael.
pop.
Yeah, well, he was he. I remember his singing.
Yeah.
He wasn't that great, but he was okay. I remember
Well, I
George
I
Michael.
enjoyed him. I thought he was
He
a
was
lot of
okay.
fun.
He was okay. No,
Yeah.
no, there was nothing wrong with him.
No, but the same thing with him. They're both really deep people, the Cancer
So
cats.
why did you bring him up?
Oh, I just said it was interesting because he also.
Oh, oh, all right. But he didn't
Yeah.
commit. He didn't commit
Yes, he
suicide.
did.
George Michael?
George Michael did too, yeah.
Really?
Not Boy George, George Michael.
I forget about Boy George. Whatever happened to him, I don't
Oh, no,
even
he's
know.
still around, yeah. I
Oh
think he's a
yeah.
Cancer
Oh,
buffalo,
he turned
actually.
into a man, maybe.
That's
Stop being
he's
boy.
Man George, yeah. Um,
George Michael. I didn't know he committed suicide.
yeah, and also, yeah, Cancer cat. I just thought it was so interesting. Yeah, I cried when both
Well,
of them.
now when
Yeah,
you look at the sign Cancer and the cat, I don't know. We're going way over, but Cancer cat. You're putting together two water signs belonging to the West. And in the East, they are also very tightly matched because the cat, or let's call it the rabbit, I have to remind everybody that the Chinese prefer the word rabbit, the Vietnamese prefer cat. They both belong to the same glyph as Pisces. Uh, and so Pisces and Cancer still get along. And in China, the Pisces cat or rabbit is wood by nature. And Cancer is the month, the Chinese goat, and that is fire, and wood produces fire. So these two are bedtime fellows. They're very connected. If one gets depressed, the other
right.
one is going to get more depressed. So depression is very bad for these types because water is dangerous when it's depressed. And the reason it's dangerous is because its action is very subtle. If they're angry about something, it takes an awful long time for that anger to surface. And when it does, it becomes
Boy,
like
now you got me nervous.
tempestuous. It becomes like a hurricane. It becomes out of control. And that's when suicide can take place. All right, I think that we should be coming to a close in
Oh,
this.
yeah. Oh,
I
gosh.
mean, we're not going to sit here all day, are we?
No, so thank you so much for joining us and sticking around.
Because we'll have a lot to talk about. We've
I
got quite a list of things
my
here.
biggest concern is to not be offensive or insensitive to anyone. It was a little controversial. They made me nervous,
I
but
don't think you were. You thought because I'm very direct.
right.
Yes, one
But what
thing
I
you
do
will.
understand is that Michael is speaking from like a deep internal personal experience from an Aries point of view. So the way that he right, I'm an objective side of the plane of the zodiac. So the way that he interprets that is all through his body, all through his physical nature, and that's how it presents.
Well, we should keep in mind
And I'm ceremonial
at
and
least as
yeah,
a little remark of positivism towards me. You talk about me being subjective. That's true by sun sign.
right.
But my moon belongs
Yeah,
to
the moon,
Aquarius.
sure,
So
sure.
the second luminary is in Aquarius, which is objective. Now, there's a lot of good reason for me to be include objectivity. And then my sun is in the eighth house. Again, objectivity. The other planets,
Yeah.
Mars and uh, what's the other one? Not Saturn. Mars and Saturn. They're also in the objective side
Yes.
of the zodiac.
Yeah.
They're in the what are they? Oh no, they're in Gemini and Jyotish, right?
Yes.
Oh, so they're in the subjective side. Okay.
It is really interesting. That's uh
But the moon, I mean Mars,
but also like the Mars conjunct Saturn, there can be a
Mercury and
potential for
Mars,
volatility.
Mercury, and Venus are all on the objective side of the zodiac.
Right.
So I'm a pretty good mix. If I speak direct and I tend to speak the truth, and if someone thinks that I've made a mistake, by all means, please come on the in the chat room and type something in and ask me a question. I'll give you the reason behind why I think the way I do, and you will see that I'm very practical in that regard. That it's thought out, and I may not be completely right, and I won't ever tell anyone that I'm completely right. But I'll give you a good reason why what I say will still pretty much stand.
Yeah.
In any event, I think it's time to bid ourselves farewell, or
Yeah.
you bid the audience farewell until the next podcast, which will be this Friday,
Yes.
this coming Friday,
Yes. Today's Mercury's day.
right? Right. Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So,
Well, that's everything, I guess, for today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for hanging out with our just random conversation.
yeah, we had a good time. We spoke about Kalia, and
Yeah, our deepest
our
condolences.
condolences to the family
Yeah.
and friends. I am sure that's a tragedy and a big loss. Uh, Suicide creates the unexpected loss, and it's the shock that it's more
Yeah.
has greater effects on us than the actual event. People die all the time, but depends on how they die that makes us react certain ways.
And we still have the choice of celebrating her as long as we want
Well,
because her effect is always going to be felt.
she's still a soul that belongs to the
Right.
universe,
That's right.
and she made herself seen. Now she left, but she'll be back.
So,
That's what we can
okay.
count on.
All right. So, thank you, everyone. As usual, all our love and travel light.
Bye.